Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive takes us into a federal courtroom, specifically looking at excerpts from the verbatim testimony of actor Cuba Gooding Jr.
Mm-hmm. And our source here is a really detailed report from Inner City Press, covering his time on the stand during a trial involving Sean Diddy Combs.
Right, and the mission here is, well, it's to cut through the noise, try and extract the most important nuggets of insight from this testimony.
Focusing on the factual content presented under oath, definitely, but also getting a sense of the dynamics and culture he's describing.
Absolutely. And just a heads up for you listening, the original material is, well, it's difficult.
It really is. And while we're focused on what was said under oath, some themes are heavy. So viewer discretion is strongly advised if you go looking for the original source.
Okay, got it. So let's set the scene. Cuba Gooding Jr. takes a stand,
Right.
and the report immediately notes he's visibly affected.
Yeah, like a heavy sigh, his face weathered. He tried to steady his hands. You can almost feel the weight of that moment just reading it.
It sounds intense. And this was his first public testimony under oath about his ties to Combs and, specifically, this whole situation.
That's right. The first time addressing it directly like this, especially with his own name getting dragged into related lawsuits.
And his stated purpose for being there. It sounds pretty stark from the report.
It really was. He apparently said, I'm not here to protect anyone anymore, and I'm here to tell the truth, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts.
Oh, wow. That certainly sets a tone. So the prosecutor starts walking him through how the relationship with Combs began.
Yeah, and initially it sounds like pretty standard industry stuff, casual parties, mixers.
Yacht invites, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. He met Combs in the early 2000s through a mutual friend, apparently.
Yes, and his description of Combs back then is interesting. He calls him charismatic, powerful, someone who made you feel important.
Like you were the most important person in the room. I saw that quote.
Exactly. But then he quickly adds that the charm came with a price.
Okay, came with a price. What do you think he meant by that, based on the rest of it?
Well, reading between the lines of the testimony that follows, it seems to imply that feeling important wasn't free. It came with unspoken expectations, maybe obligations.
Right, like you owed something, or you were tied into something bigger.
Yeah, perhaps a sense of owing loyalty, or maybe even silence. It hints at that power imbalance right from the start.
Okay, so let's move to the specific incident that seems like a real focus, the yacht party. This is where Combs allegedly involved a young man referred to as Lil Rod.
Right. And Lil Rod, just for clarity for everyone listening, is the plaintiff in this particular lawsuit alleging some really disturbing behavior involving himself and others.
Got it. So Cuba's account of this night, he starts off saying he didn't really know what was happening.
Yeah, he thought it was just another party, but then he says he pretty quickly got this unsettling feeling.
And that feeling came from Combs saying things like, I got something special for you. He said that felt off.
Exactly. That phrase, repeated, seemed to trigger something for him, and he specifically observed Lil Rod there.
How did he describe Lil Rod?
He described him as real quiet, someone who looked scared, and he felt Lil Rod didn't belong there, not like that. That gut feeling seems pretty significant.
And then he was apparently very direct about his own actions or non-actions regarding Lil Rod that night.
Oh, absolutely. The report highlights his explicit denial, looking right at the jury, saying things like, I didn't do anything, I didn't touch him, and emphatically, I never touched him, I swear to God.
Raising his hand while saying it, the report mentioned. That's a strong denial.
Very strong. He stated his belief was that whatever Combs might have been planning, he personally didn't play that game, but he felt Combs set it up like that, like he wanted him to participate.
The prosecutor asked him if he felt trapped in that situation.
Yes, and his response was reportedly very emotional.
Yeah.
Yes, God, yes, he said, and then explained, you don't say no to Sean Combs. He had people eyes he'd remind you without saying a word.
Wow. That line about not saying no, it speaks volumes about the perceived power dynamic.
Definitely. And his response that night, he got up and left early, said he knew something was wrong.
So he made a choice, but it sounds like one made under, well, immense pressure.
That's the picture painted, yes. And he seemed really keen to draw a line between this and his own past legal troubles.
Right. He mentioned he had owned up to those pleading guilty, settlements going through hell, he said.
Exactly. He testified that this situation, the stuff alleged around Combs and that yacht party, wasn't me.
And the impact of his name being linked to this kind of allegation after everything else, that clearly hit him hard.
Absolutely. He testified he thought he'd lose my mind. feeling like people assumed he was part of that madness, despite his whole career.
So his motivation to testify, then, seems rooted in trying to control that narrative.
It seems so, wanting people to hear it from me, not a blog, not a whisper, me. Clarifying his position on these specific events seems key for him.
The report mentioned when a recording of Lil Rod's deposition was played. How did Gooding react?
He just stared straight ahead, apparently. A deposition, by the way, is that sworn testimony taken out of court before trial.
Okay, and after the recording.
He cleared his throat, apologized if he'd ever made anyone uncomfortable generally, but then doubled down on the denial about the yacht party. I didn't touch that kid. Didn't touch anyone at that party.
And he seemed aware that Diddy's team might try to, well, point fingers.
Yeah, he basically said if they want to use him as a scapegoat now, they picked the wrong man. A very defiant stance.
There's also this undercurrent of regret, isn't there, about not speaking up sooner?
Yes, he's quoted whispering something like, I should have said something sooner, but I was scared. That fear is a recurring theme.
Let's zoom out a bit then. He talked about the broader scene, the parties, this system he mentioned. How did he describe that world changing?
He said the parties started like typical Hollywood events, networking, seeing people, but gradually they became more exclusive.
Like super controlled.
Exactly. He felt not even your agent could get you in unless you had the right face or name. It shifted from open industry events to something much more curated, maybe even secretive.
He gave details about a specific party at Combs' Miami mansion.
Right, phones confiscated at the door, that's always a red flag, isn't it? Given robes, told it was spa-themed.
But inside, he said it felt like walking into another world. What does that even mean?
It suggests an environment designed maybe to disorient or isolate guests, remove them from normal reality. That sensory detail is quite striking.
He also addressed his own motives for testifying, right? Said it wasn't about redemption.
Yeah, he insisted he wasn't trying to save himself, saying, I've already fallen. His stated goal was trying to put a stop to what's still going on. Whether you believe that motive or not, that's what he claimed.
And when asked about witnessing actual harm, he made a distinction.
A key one, yes. He testified he heard things, screams, crying, saw women rushed out through back doors. But he specified he didn't see anyone physically hurt, not with my eyes.
But then he immediately added, but I knew.
Yes, and emphasized, we all knew. That implies the atmosphere, the events, were disturbing enough that knowledge of probable harm was widespread, even without witnessing every specific act. It's that heavy weight of knowing.
He also mentioned people, mostly women, who just stopped coming to parties.
And his belief now is they were probably warned, threatened, silenced. That points to potential consequences for stepping out of line, or maybe seeing too much.
And his reason for finally speaking now, he connected it to having a son.
Yes, realizing silence doesn't protect anyone. It only makes the monsters bolder. And interestingly, he noted Combs kept calling him after his own legal scandals hit the news.
Why would Combs do that?
Gooding seemed to wonder if Combs thought he'd be sympathetic or maybe expected him to stay quiet because he had his own problems, like a damaged goods stick together kind of thing.
The report also mentions a photo shown in court from the Bahamas in 2013.
Oh, yeah. Apparently showed Gooding, Combs, and other guests in the background who were barely clothed or had blurred faces.
And Gooding's reaction to seeing it again.
Pretty telling. He said something like, didn't know they were that young. No one asked, no one checked. They just smiled for the camera.
Wow. He said the photo haunts him now.
Yeah, because he looks happy in it. But reflecting back, he thinks about the potential suffering happening just outside the frame, That contrast between appearance and reality.
Okay, let's dig into some of the more specific incidents he described. These seem to really highlight that culture of complicity and silence he's alleging.
Right. He talked about a night at Combs' house in L.A. Parties there apparently required NDAs, non-disclosure agreements.
So legally binding silence right from the start.
Exactly. And people wore masks, he said, not for fun, but to protect names. That detail alone paints such a picture of enforced secrecy.
Then there was the story about hearing a scream upstairs.
Yeah, he testified he heard a girl scream, saw a security guard quickly slam a door shut. When he asked about it, the guard just shut him down. This room's off limits, Mr. Gooding.
And what did Gooding do?
He walked away, said he didn't say a word to anyone, and he calls this specific moment what haunts me the most.
Saying, I could have stopped something, could have asked questions, but I just didn't. That inaction.
It's a core part of his testimony about his own complicity, yes. Facing that clear red flag and choosing not to act.
He connected this later, didn't he? Said he saw some of the same girls eventually appear in lawsuits.
Mm-hmm. Different names, same eyes, same fear, was his description. And he explained why he didn't speak up back then. He was already needed my own mess with his own charges.
Worried people would just say he was trying to save face.
Precisely, which highlights how someone's own vulnerabilities can be used, or perceived to be used, to keep them quiet about other things.
He then widened the lens, talking about the silence of others present at these parties.
Yeah, he stated dozens of people, actors, producers, athletes, influencers, big names, saw the same things, maybe worse, but said nothing.
Calling that the real sickness, the shame.
Yes, describing Hollywood itself as a polished nightmare. It points fingers at a much more systemic issue where the environment itself enforces silence.
What about his reaction when the FBI raided Combs' properties recently?
He said he wasn't surprised, actually relieved. And revealingly, he hoped it was because if they took him down, maybe people would stop calling me crazy for what I'd seen.
That suggests he had tried talking about this before, maybe informally, and wasn't believed.
It certainly implies that, doesn't it? That he felt dismissed or disbelieved earlier.
He also mentioned cameras being everywhere at Combs' places.
Yes, open and hidden cameras. Combs apparently joked about keeping memories, but Gooding saw them as weapons.
Weapons how? Like for blackmail or leverage?
That seems to be the implication. A way to potentially document things that could be used later to ensure silence or compliance.
There was also that detail about people's phones being searched when they left parties.
Yeah, and he gave an example, though maybe hearsay, of a producer supposedly blacklisted for years after a party, rumored because he threatened to go public. It suggests active monitoring and real consequences.
And he described what sounded like an indirect warning from Combs himself.
Right. At a brunch, Combs apparently pulled him aside, said something like, "We're both survivors, man. We've both seen too much, and people like us, we gotta stick together."
Sounds supportive on the surface.
Like Gooding said, it felt like a warning, like stay on side, keep quiet.
He kept coming back to addressing his own past, didn't he? Trying to head off accusations that this is just deflection.
Very much so. He insisted, "I'm not deflecting, I'm owning it," regarding his own issues. But framed the situation as bigger than him. This is a system, a sickness, a machine that feeds on silence and thrives on fear.
Trying to position his testimony as exposing that larger system.
Exactly. Using his personal experience, including his failures to act, as an example of how that system operates.
He shared even more disturbing accounts, too. Like one from a beat after party in Atlanta.
Yeah, 2014 saw a girl who looked barely legal, maybe even that, dancing on a table. Said Combs pointed, security took her to a side room.
And he never saw her leave. Did he report that one?
No, he admitted he didn't. He said he rationalized it at the time. She'd be fine. Wasn't my place. Maybe didn't see clear enough. But deep down, I knew. It's that recurring pattern. Witnessing something deeply troubling and finding justifications for inaction, even while acknowledging an inner sense that it was wrong.
He talked about Hollywood's currency being secrets.
Right. That Combs had secrets on everyone, and that power, that potential for exposure, kept people locked in silence. That's a chilling insight into how leverage might work in those circles.
Then there was the Hollywood Hills weekend retreat description. That sounded particularly strange.
Extremely. A weird energy, tension, staff handing out black and gold masks, calling it a themed party.
But what he saw in the back wing.
Yeah, he described people lined up like cattle men and women, some barely dressed, with Combs in the middle, like a king overseeing a ritual. That's incredibly potent, disturbing imagery.
And when he tried to leave that scene,
he said he was stopped by a security guard who basically told him, "You didn't see anything Gooding," adding, "That's the rule, you want to keep working right."
Wow. Explicitly linking silence to his career.
Exactly. And Gooding testified he just nodded, feeling he wasn't brave back then. That moment really encapsulates the pressure and the choice he felt forced to make.
He seemed very aware people might doubt his motives now, thinking he's just trying to clean up his own image.
Yes, he addressed that head on again. Said if his testimony helps stop even one person from being harmed, it's worth it. And starkly accepted his complicity by staying quiet.
Saying he watched the house turn into a graveyard of innocence and did nothing. That's a heavy admission.
It is. Accepting responsibility for inaction, even while explaining the fear and the systemic pressures, is a significant part of his narrative here.
Maybe one of the most, viscerally upsetting accounts was the Las Vegas party incident.
Agreed. Seeing a young woman being pulled down a hallway, seeing her eyes trying to signal me for help.
And he said he did nothing, just walked away.
He testified that moment, Keeps me up at night every night. Admitted there were dozens of those girls over the years.
And the collective inaction. We didn't ask questions. Nobody did. We were too scared, too selfish, too deep in the world Diddy built.
That shared silence, that collective turning away, is central to the system he's trying to describe. It wasn't just him, it was the environment.
Did he ever try to tell anyone officially or semi-officially?
He mentioned trying in 2016, called a lawyer friend, told him about the masks, the parties, the silences.
And the lawyer's advice?
Drop it. Cited the NDAs and warned him he'd likely be painted as unstable or unreliable because of his own charges at the time.
So another dead end? He stayed quiet again.
It highlights how even internal attempts to raise alarms could be shut down by the very structures, legal and reputational, that were part of the system.
So what finally changed? What gave him the courage, as he put it, to come forward now?
He directly credited Cassie and Lowrod speaking out. He said seeing them come forward made him realize he wasn't alone in it, wasn't the only one with nightmares or carrying guilt.
So their actions empowered him.
That's what he testified. It gave me the courage to reach out to the prosecution to say, put me on the stand, I'll talk. He felt maybe if someone had done that for the girl in Vegas, her story wouldn't be just a cautionary tale.
He stated his goal wasn't redemption for himself.
Yeah, so that's between me and God, but framed it as being about justice for the people who got hurt, for the names we'll never know, for the ones who never made it out of those houses.
The report also describes a moment where he looked directly at Sean Combs in the courtroom.
Yes, and delivered a pretty direct message, hoping Combs remembers every name, every scream, every party turned prison, because we remember now and the truth is louder than your money.
That's quite a statement to make in court.
Indeed. And his final words on silence and truth were equally powerful.
Silence is a chain, and I broke mine.
Emphasizing you don't have to be perfect to speak out, just honest, done with the lies. He described Hollywood's sickness as this addiction to power, with Combs as the dealer.
Getting loyalty by making people feel powerful themselves.
Exactly. He testified it cost him dearly: career, reputation, maybe even my soul. He acknowledged lost years rebuilding, knows he can't get it back, but feels he can now be a witness, a voice.
And the testimony ended on a very emotional note.
Apparently so. Began to cry, described it as relief, saying he can't keep carrying it, addressed the room like a confession. I'm sorry to the women, to the people who thought I was better, to the ones I didn't save.
And then just sat down, drained, with the courtroom in stunned silence. What an ending.
Truly. It leaves you with a lot to process.
Yeah, definitely. What really stands out when you deep dive into this testimony based on the Inner City Press report isn't just the specific alleged incidents.
No, it's more the pervasive atmosphere he describes, that mix of power, fear, and enforced silence that allegedly allowed these things to happen or continue happening.
Right. Cuba Gooding Jr.'s account paints this picture of someone caught in that system, witnessing things, feeling pressured into complicity, maybe just through inaction.
And the immense personal cost of that silence over years versus the struggle to finally speak out, even with his own complicated past hanging over him.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, this testimony, if a jury finds it credible, really highlights how powerful figures can potentially create these environments.
Environments where harmful acts allegedly occur behind closed doors,
Yeah.
And how a culture built on secrets, maybe fear, maybe personal gain, can lead even witnesses, people who aren't directly involved in the act itself, to stay quiet.
It suggests complicity isn't always active participation. It can also be that really heavy burden carried by those who see something wrong but feel unable or maybe just too afraid to act.
It really does. It raises a tough question for all of us, doesn't it? When
Right.
we encounter situations that feel fundamentally wrong or just off.
What is the true price of looking away? Not just for the individuals involved, but for the wider culture. And what does it genuinely take to find the courage to speak up?
Especially when you feel vulnerable yourself or feel like you've, as he put it, already fallen in some way.
Definitely something to consider as you navigate your own world.